You know, there's something deeply unsettling about living in a world where sadness has become a crime, where the moment you express anything less than radiant joy, people start offering you solutions, affirmations, or worse, they start avoiding you altogether. We've created this strange society where being human, with all its messy emotions and complex inner weather, is somehow seen as a personal failure. I've been thinking about this lately, watching people around me perform happiness like it's their full-time job. The forced smiles in grocery stores, the "I'm blessed" responses to genuine questions about well-being, the way we've turned every conversation into a highlight reel. And I can't help but wonder, when did we decide that the full spectrum of human emotion was too dangerous to feel? There's something revolutionary happening though. Quietly, almost invisibly, some people are laying down their masks. They're choosing to be courageously, authentically unhappy when that's what's real. And this choice, this simple act of emotional honesty, is perhaps one of the bravest things you can do in our current world. Let me explain what I mean by courage to be unhappy, because this isn't about wallowing in misery or choosing pessimism as a lifestyle. This is about something far more profound and necessary. The courage to be unhappy is the willingness to feel and express the full range of human emotions without immediately rushing to fix, change, or apologize for them. It's the radical act of saying, "I'm struggling," without following it up with, "but I'm working on it," or "but I'm grateful for the lesson." It's allowing yourself to sit in the discomfort of genuine sadness, anger, or confusion without performing recovery for other people's comfort. This isn't about depression or clinical mental health issues. Those require professional support and care. This is about the normal, healthy, absolutely necessary emotions that our culture has pathologized. The grief that needs to be felt, not fixed. The anger that signals important boundaries. The sadness that honors what we've lost. The confusion that precedes clarity. You see, we've confused emotional wellness with emotional performance. True emotional health isn't about maintaining a constant state of positivity. It's about having the full range of emotional responses available to us and the wisdom to honor what each feeling is trying to teach us. The people who have this courage understand something crucial. Emotions aren't problems to be solved. They're information to be received. They're not performing happiness for others. They're practicing authenticity for themselves. And in a world that profits from our insecurity and emotional suppression, this becomes a quiet but powerful form of rebellion. This courage shows up in small moments, declining to say fine when you're not, allowing tears to fall without apologizing, expressing disappointment without immediately looking for the silver lining. It's the willingness to be fully human in a world that wants you to be a carefully curated version of yourself. The first danger of developing this courage is that you'll quickly discover how uncomfortable your authenticity makes other people. And this discomfort isn't just awkward, it can be isolating in ways you never expected. When you stop performing happiness, you become a mirror for everyone around you who is still trapped in their own emotional performance. Your willingness to say, "I'm having a hard time," suddenly highlights their inability to do the same. Your tears make their forced smiles feel hollow. Your honest struggle makes their "everything happens for a reason" platitudes sound empty, even to themselves. I think about this like emotional tuning forks. When one person starts vibrating at the frequency of authentic emotion, it causes everyone around them to either harmonize or create dissonance. Most people, unfortunately, choose dissonance. They'll start offering unsolicited advice, sharing stories about how they overcame similar challenges, or simply change the subject entirely. You'll notice friends who used to seek you out for deep conversations suddenly becoming busy when you're going through difficult times. Family members who praised your positive attitude will start suggesting therapy or self-help books the moment you express genuine struggle. Colleagues who once appreciated your emotional intelligence will begin to see your authenticity as bringing down the team energy. This rejection cuts deep because it's not just about your current emotional state, it's about your fundamental humanity being deemed unacceptable. You realize that many of your relationships were built on a foundation of emotional performance, and when you stop performing, the relationships begin to crumble. The cruel irony is that the people who distance themselves from your authenticity are often the ones who need it most. They're so terrified of their own suppressed emotions that witnessing yours feels threatening. Your courage to feel reminds them of everything they've been avoiding in themselves. But here's what's particularly challenging. This isolation often happens precisely when you most need genuine connection. When you're struggling and finally brave enough to be honest about it, the world often responds by making you feel even more alone. It's like being punished for telling the truth about the human experience. This can create a terrible cycle where your authentic expression of difficulty is met with rejection, which creates more difficulty, which you then feel pressured to hide, bringing you right back to emotional performance. Breaking this cycle requires tremendous courage and often finding new people who can handle your full humanity. The second danger is more insidious. You'll start to see the emotional manipulation embedded in our culture's obsession with positivity. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Everywhere you look, you'll begin to notice how the pressure to be positive serves systems that benefit from your compliance. The workplace that encourages you to bring your best self while systematically overworking and underpaying you. The social media platforms that profit from your insecurity while selling you the tools to manifest your best life. The relationships where your emotional labor is expected, but your emotional needs are seen as burdensome. You'll realize that positive vibes only isn't about wellness, it's about control. It's about keeping people compliant, productive, and consuming. When you're not allowed to feel angry about injustice, you're less likely to demand change. When you're not allowed to feel sad about loss, you're more likely to keep buying things to fill the void. When you're not allowed to feel confused about your life direction, you're more likely to accept whatever path others have laid out for you. This awareness can be overwhelming. You'll start to see how the self-help industry, while offering some genuine value, also perpetuates the idea that your natural human emotions are problems to be fixed rather than experiences to be honored. You'll notice how spiritual bypassing masquerades as enlightenment, how toxic positivity disguises itself as emotional intelligence. The wellness industry becomes particularly frustrating because it takes the very real human need for healing and growth and turns it into another performance. You're supposed to be grateful for your trauma because it made you stronger. You're supposed to find the lesson in every loss. You're supposed to trust the process, even when the process is clearly broken. You'll find yourself caught between two worlds, the unconscious world of emotional performance that you can no longer participate in, and the conscious world of authentic feeling that few people understand or support. You become like someone who has learned a new language but has no one to speak it with. This awareness can lead to a different kind of loneliness, not just the loneliness of being misunderstood, but the loneliness of seeing clearly in a world that chooses blindness. You understand why people cling to their positive thinking and emotional bypassing, because the alternative, feeling everything fully, can be overwhelming without proper support and understanding. The challenge becomes learning to hold this awareness without becoming cynical, maintaining your emotional authenticity without becoming bitter about others' inability to do the same. The third, and perhaps most challenging danger, is that you'll have to confront the parts of yourself that were invested in the performance, and this confrontation can shake your sense of identity to its core. You see, most of us didn't start performing happiness to manipulate others. We started because we genuinely believed it would protect us. Maybe you learned early that sad children don't get love, that angry children get abandoned, that confused children are burdens. So you developed this incredible skill of emotional regulation, of always finding the bright side, of being the strong one everyone could count on. This performance wasn't just about pleasing others, it became part of how you saw yourself. You were the positive one, the resilient one, the one who could handle anything with grace. Your ability to stay optimistic in difficult times became a source of pride, even identity. People knew you as someone who could find meaning in suffering, who could inspire others through your unwavering faith in better days ahead. But when you start allowing yourself to feel authentically, you realize how much of your personality was actually a coping mechanism. The cheerful optimist might discover a deep well of grief that's been waiting decades to be acknowledged. The strong, independent person might find a terrified child who never learned it was safe to need others. The wise advice giver might encounter their own profound confusion about life's meaning. This can create an identity crisis that feels like losing yourself entirely. Who are you if you're not the positive one?
What's your value if you're not the one who helps others see the bright side? How do you relate to people if you're not constantly offering encouragement and solutions? You might find yourself grieving not just current difficulties, but years of unfelt feelings. The sadness you never allowed yourself when your parents divorced. The anger you suppressed when you were treated unfairly. The fear you pushed down when facing major life transitions. All of these emotions have been waiting patiently for permission to be felt, and when you finally give that permission, they can arrive with overwhelming intensity. There's also the strange guilt that comes with realizing how much energy you've spent managing other people's comfort with your emotions. You might feel angry about the years you spent being smaller than you were, more palatable than was honest, more positive than was genuine. But then you feel guilty about that anger because you chose that path, even if unconsciously. The journey back to emotional authenticity often requires grieving the person you thought you were while simultaneously discovering who you actually are underneath all that performance.
I once knew a woman named Sarah who embodied everything our culture celebrates about resilience. She was the friend everyone called during their darkest moments, the colleague who could find opportunity in every setback, the daughter who never burdened her aging parents with her own struggles. For 38 years, Sarah had perfected the art of transforming pain into wisdom, fear into faith, and disappointment into determination. Sarah's life looked enviable from the outside. She had built a successful consulting business, helping companies navigate difficult transitions. Her social media was filled with inspirational quotes and photos of her adventures. She spoke at conferences about finding purpose through adversity, sharing her story of how losing her job had led her to discover her true calling. Everyone who knew her described her the same way. Sarah is just so positive, she never lets anything get her down. But something shifted for Sarah during what should have been a celebration. She had just landed her biggest client, a contract that would secure her business for the next 2 years. As she sat in her car after the meeting, she waited for the familiar rush of gratitude and excitement that usually followed her successes. Instead, she felt empty. Not just tired, but profoundly hollow, as if she had been running on fumes for so long that she had forgotten what actual fuel felt like. That night, for the first time in decades, Sarah allowed herself to ask a question she had been avoiding. What do I actually feel about my life? The answer that emerged terrified her. She felt exhausted by the constant pressure to find meaning in everything. She felt resentful about always being the strong one. She felt sad about relationships that existed only because she provided emotional labor. She felt angry about years of minimizing her own needs to maintain her image as someone who had it all figured out. The next few months were the most difficult of Sarah's adult life, but also the most honest. She started declining invitations to be the motivational speaker at events. She stopped posting inspirational content online. When friends asked how she was doing, she began answering truthfully instead of automatically saying blessed or grateful. The response was swift and revealing. Some friends became uncomfortable with her newfound honesty, suggesting she might be going through a phase or needed professional help. Her family worried that she was becoming negative. A few clients expressed concern about her energy during meetings. But something beautiful also began to happen. Sarah started attracting different kinds of relationships, people who were drawn to her authenticity rather than her performance. She discovered that her business actually improved when she stopped trying to be inspirational and started being real. Clients began trusting her more because they could sense she wasn't trying to sell them a fantasy of easy transformation. Most importantly, Sarah began to understand the difference between genuine resilience and emotional performance. Real strength, she realized, included the courage to feel weak sometimes. True wisdom included the humility to admit confusion. Authentic positivity could only emerge from a foundation of honest feeling, not from the suppression of difficult emotions. Sarah's journey taught her that the courage to be unhappy wasn't about becoming a pessimist. It was about becoming fully human. So how do we cultivate this courage to be unhappy in a world that punishes emotional authenticity? How do we learn to honor our full humanity without becoming overwhelmed by the intensity of unfelt feelings? The path forward requires what I call emotional archaeology, the careful, patient work of excavating buried feelings and learning to be with them without immediately trying to fix or change them. This isn't about becoming emotionally indulgent or wallowing in negativity. It's about developing the capacity to feel fully while maintaining your center. Start small. Practice saying, "I'm struggling," without following it with, "but I'm working on it." Notice the urge to immediately offer solutions when someone else expresses difficulty, and instead try simply witnessing their experience. Allow yourself to feel disappointed about something without rushing to find the lesson or silver lining. Create what I call emotional honesty zones, spaces and relationships where you can practice authentic feeling without judgment. This might be with a therapist, a trusted friend who understands this journey, or even in private journaling where you give yourself permission to feel without censoring. Learn to distinguish between feeling and drowning. Emotions, even difficult ones, have natural rhythms when we don't resist them. They rise, peak, and naturally subside if we don't fight them or feed them. The goal isn't to eliminate difficult emotions, but to develop the capacity to be with them skillfully. Most importantly, understand that this courage is not a destination, but a practice. There will be days when you slip back into performance, when the pressure to be positive feels easier than the vulnerability of authentic feeling. This doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're human. The transformation isn't about becoming someone who never feels the pressure to perform happiness. It's about developing the awareness to notice when you're performing and the choice to return to authenticity when you're ready. It's about building a life that can hold your full emotional range, not just the parts that make others comfortable. Remember, your willingness to feel authentically gives others permission to do the same. In a world starving for genuine human connection, your emotional honesty becomes a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone brave enough to receive it. And that, my friends, is perhaps the most beautiful paradox of all. The courage to be unhappy ultimately leads to a deeper, more sustainable form of joy. Not the manufactured happiness that requires constant maintenance, but the quiet contentment that comes from being fully yourself in a world that often asks you to be someone else. When you stop performing emotions you don't feel, you create space for authentic emotions to emerge. When you stop rushing to fix every difficult feeling, you discover that many of them carry important wisdom. When you stop apologizing for your humanity, you invite others to embrace theirs. The people who develop this courage become beacons in a world of emotional performance. They create pockets of authenticity where real connection becomes possible. Their willingness to feel deeply allows others to do the same. Their refusal to pretend everything is fine gives others permission to acknowledge when things aren't. This isn't about becoming someone who spreads negativity or brings others down. It's about becoming someone so grounded in their own emotional truth that they can hold space for whatever arises, in themselves and others, without needing to fix, change, or improve it. In a culture obsessed with positivity, the courage to be unhappy when that's what's real becomes a radical act of love. Love for yourself, love for truth, and ultimately love for the full spectrum of what it means to be beautifully, messily, courageously human. Your authentic emotions are not the enemy, they are the pathway home to yourself.